ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So, we begin this class on the Gospel, 26th October 1885. Sri Ramakrishna is telling the people who have assembled there, including Dr. Mahendra Lal Sarkar, he says, I went somewhere with Mathur Babu, and a number of Pandits came to argue with me. Me, a fool. I mean, in the worldly sense, he had not gone to school, nor had he any formal learning. So he's just out of fun, she's saying, I am a fool, and people, lot of Pandits came to see me when he went somewhere with Mathur Babu, knowing that he had already become well known because of Keshav Chandra Sen. So to see Sri Ramakrishna, a lot of Pandits had come. Seeing me in that strange mood and after having talked with me, they said, Sir, all that we have read, all our knowledge and all scholarship has turned to spittle after talking to you. I mean, these Pandits told Sri Ramakrishna that after coming here and talking with you, we feel that all the books that we read, all the scholarship we have acquired over so many years, everything is useless. Because here is a person who has never got any formal learning, nor has he read all the scriptures and has the scholarship that we have. But still, there's an infinite source of knowledge which he has access to. And in the following paragraphs, we'll see how Sri Ramakrishna disclosed some wonderful truths about intuitive knowledge. Knowledge that comes as a result of intuition and direct experience as opposed to book learning. We now understand these people are still continuing. Sri Ramakrishna is quoting these Pandits. We now understand that when God's grace is granted, there is no lack of spiritual knowledge. A fool becomes wise and dumb begins to speak. This is there is a similar verse where say Mukam karoti vachalam panghum langayate girim yat kripa tamaham vande paramananda madhavam. It comes in the introduction to the Gita where this verse the grace of the Lord can make the dumb speak and a lame cross mountains. Panghum langayate girim. Langayate means to cross giri. Giri means mountain. Mukam karoti vachalam. Mukam means one who is dumb, he becomes eloquent, and one who is lame has acquires the capacity to cross mountains. So Sri Ramakrishna is quoting that, and he is of course speaking in his simple Bengali. That is why I say no one becomes learned just by reading books. So here Sri Ramakrishna is apparently addressing Dr. Sarkar and all the other people who are there. Sarkar has developed an admiration for Sri Ramakrishna, but he is at a loss to understand how can a person who is so simple, who has never got any formal school learning, leave alone university education, a person who has not even gone to school, how can he speak such wonderful truths in front of people who have a formal scholarship, who have read many books, who have tried to understand the concepts of religion, understand religion through their intellect, and they have got a wonderful scholarship and command over the theoretical aspects of religion. And here is a person who has never gone to school, who is answering the most intricate questions in a very satisfactory, not only satisfactory, but a convincing manner, which generates faith in the people who are listening to him. So, the next heading, which of course the conversation is going on, but M has given a different heading. Earlier story, first instance of Samadhi, manifestation of Saraswati seated in the throat of a fool. So earlier, Sri Ramakrishna had told two parables. So M is now quoting this. Of course, he had in the conversation now, Sri Ramakrishna is alluding to that, and he is telling the same thing. He said once Mathur Babu. These are all things which have happened in the past, but Sri Ramakrishna is retelling them. He's telling what he experienced. And some of them are very wonderful mystical visions. Sri Ramakrishna. Yes, when you receive His grace, can there be any lack of knowledge? So, here he is telling us that intuition or intuitive knowledge has a different source. It doesn't arise from the manas or even buddhi, intellect. It's not through the normal intellect that you get. The intellect may be the highly developed intellect, which is a sign of the grace of God. Intellect not in the sense of a highly developed manas. A highly developed reactive mind also seems to most worldly people, people who give importance to such learning, they seem to believe that a highly refined mind, you can say, or an intellectual person has a grasp of religious truths. But Sri Ramakrishna wants to disprove that. Said no matter how fine your understanding of the spiritual concepts are, unless there is in you a yearning to understand the importance of experience as against book or mere scriptural knowledge, you have not got the real knowledge. So when he says jnana, he means real knowledge, not the knowledge which has been acquired through the study of books. So when you receive his grace, can there be any lack of knowledge? Look, I am a fool. Fool in the sense I have not gone to school. I know nothing. Then who speaks all this? How do words come to my mouth? How do I manage to speak? I have not even gone to school. The storehouse of this knowledge is inexhaustible. Now he's giving a wonderful example to explain how this intuitive knowledge comes to a person who has thoroughly purified his mind. Sri Ramakrishna and Hinduism, in his beautiful article or a small piece which Swami Vivekananda wrote about his master, there he mentions that Sri Ramakrishna discarded all sorts of formal learning just to demonstrate before the world that intuitive knowledge can be accessed, the divine knowledge or knowledge based on real spiritual experience can be accessed by anybody who has purified his mind, who has controlled his mind, and who has it as the grace of the Lord or surrendered his will to Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, who is having this universal mind. When you are part of the universal mind, when you identify yourself with that storehouse of universal mind, you never fall short of ideas. To explain this, how it happens, Sri Ramakrishna is trying to show it through a parable. He says, one day in Kamarpukur, I saw them. Them means the people who were selling paddy, weighing heaps of paddy. As they did, they chanted Ram, Ram, Ram. This is a habit, and this was a habit in Bengal, where they used to chant Ram, 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 and then sell. See, it was a habit. Such wonderful habits have been given up by our country, where taking the name of the divine Lord now, we say it is not a good thing because we live in a secular country, will be hurting the sentiments of other people. But that is not true. If you had been to the villages in the early 19th century, and when Sri Krishna lived in Kamarpukur, then you would find that people used to chant the holy name of the Lord, whatever be their ishta. May not be Ram, it may be Krishna, maybe Ma or Kali or all these things. People used to, maybe they did it mechanically, but still they used to chant it. So these farmers, when they were selling this paddy, they used to push this grain paddy. Push in the sense they would be selling. There would be a very big heap near them, and they would weigh some paddy and put it on the sheet lying in front, cloth lying in front of them, and then push it towards the customer, who would then pick it up, put it in his bag, and take it away. That was how it was distributed. So as they did, as they were weighing heaps of paddy, they chanted Ram, 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 Ram. One person was weighing and the other was pushing the heap of paddy. There were two people normally. One would weigh after the negotiation is over. One person will weigh, the other will, after it is weighed, he'll push that grain towards the customer and he has to pick it up and go. Then the next person comes and whatever he wants, it would be weighed and pushed in front of him. So there is a constant flow. Everybody comes and takes away his own share of paddy. He buys his own whatever he needs, and then the next one comes. So there was a big heap behind, from which the owner would uh, weigh the paddy and then pass it on, push it towards the customer. So one person would help him in weighing and the other person would just push the heap of paddy as the first heap dwindled. It is the same in my case when I talk. Before I finish, my Divine Mother pushes more from her inexhaustible source of knowledge. Inexhaustible source of knowledge is with my Divine Mother. So he had as a child just surrendered to the will of the Divine Mother, and for everything he used to depend on her. That kind of total self surrender, the spirit of total self surrender, enabled him to access, because of Mother's grace, the inexhaustible knowledge in the cosmic mind, which he would express no matter what the question, no matter who asked that question. That is why people like Keshav Chandra Sen and great scholars used to come, and people of different religions used to come, because they used to be wonderstruck by the amount of pure wisdom based on experience Sri Ramakrishna used to distribute. And doctor, though he was surprised, his rational mind would not allow him to accept that somebody could have access to knowledge without formal learning. But still, he found it is true. It is too good to be true, but it is true. And he used to come for that purpose. To remove any doubts doctor had, Sri Ramakrishna continues further. He says, during my boyhood, he is telling him about another experience. During my boyhood, God manifested himself in me. I was 11 and I was going across a field when I saw something above. He had seen those white cranes against the backdrop of dark clouds. That's how the uh, incident is described in the Leela Prasanga, in the divine play, The Great Master. So there he was passing through a field when he was hardly 11 and he saw something in the sky. He saw this beautiful white flock of cranes flying against the wonderful dark black background, and that overwhelmed him. They say I was completely unconscious, not aware of anything. So after that, a drastic change came in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. This was his first vision. And first experience, you can say. When you say vision, it does not necessarily mean that you can see God, or you will see God, or you will have a form of God in front of you. Experiences can come as sound. We have five sense organs, and we have five subtle sense organs connected to those. So we can see them, or we can hear the sound, we can smell. There are many ways that one becomes overwhelmed with these experiences, which we normally call as visions, because we see something, but it is not necessary. Here, seeing was just a spark, but the ecstasy he felt was not a result of a vision of something. The vision was just a trigger. The birds that he saw was just a trigger. Many people see these birds, even we see when we look against the dark black sky. Sometimes we might see a flock of swans or flock of birds flying. So when you see that, we don't get that same experience. But Sri Ramakrishna got that experience, and he explains he became a different person after that. I have become a different person since then. I began to see another person within me. So this is what is so mystical. These are all experiences. And Sri Ramakrishna is telling them what he exactly felt when he had that vision. After he came back to consciousness, he always felt there is another person within me. When went to worship the deity, my hand, instead of going to the deity, would come to my head and I would offer flowers to it. So before that, when he was doing puja, he would offer the flowers on the head of the deity. But when he was possessed, or when he had experienced this vision, after that, very often he felt that divinity within him and used to put, instead of putting the flowers on the head of the deity, he used to put it on himself. In fact, when he did it in Dakshineshwar, many people thought he was mad, and they complained to Mathur Babu, saying that, see, he is committing sacrilege. The flowers meant for God, he is putting on his own head. But seeing his ecstasy, seeing in his divine fervor, seeing his purity of mind, Mathur Babu scolded them. Let him do whatever he wants. Don't touch him. So the young man who was living with me would not come near me. The young man, when he is saying that when this kind of vision happened, some of the people who were living near him, they refused to come, because after that they saw something divine in him, and it was awe-inspiring. They could just not understand what is that divine glow within him. He said, I see a strange light on your face, in your face. I'm afraid to come near you. So after this vision, people started seeing certain things. Then Sri Ramakrishna, as you remember, had to pray to the mother to remove that, so that he became accessible to human beings. Otherwise, people would see the strange light, the golden hue which he had, and all these things brought about a transformation which was not allowing people to come to him as a normal human being. So he prayed to Mother, and then that divinity went into hiding inside, and only genuine people could see that or could perceive that. So now the topic is going on whether we have a free will or whether it is God's will. This has been a topic of discussion for centuries. Rationalists believe that God has created us, no doubt, but He has given us a free will. We can do whatever we like. And there's another opinion which says that there is no free will. It's only God's will which is manifesting itself as free will. So Sri Ramakrishna will try to explain this dichotomy. Free will or God's will. And M is quoting a verse from the Gita, a small portion of a verse number 61 from chapter 18. Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. All beings revolve by this Maya, by his Maya, as though mounted on a machine. So It is the machine which runs the instrument. So, yantra arudhani maya. Through my maya, I make all these things move. The prana which runs the body, the manas which controls the prana, which receives messages from the indriyas, the annamaya kosha, and everything, all the physiological processes, the mental processes, the gross processes which we see in Prakriti are nothing but a play, divine play through the Leela of his Maya. We, as if you remember, we discussed this in the Bhagavad Gita where Sri Krishna is telling that this Yog Maya of mine is so difficult to understand. Only through my grace you can understand it. I know how these beings come into being. I know their past, present, and future, but they do not know it because they are caught because of the moha due to dvandva moha. That is what we discussed yesterday. Dvandva means strong likes and dislikes. But if you surrender, if you take everything as God's will, then our life becomes very easy. Our life becomes complicated only when we have strong likes and dislikes. We hate, we have raga, we have dvesha. That itself is Maya, as we saw yesterday. But Sri Ramakrishna says, if we surrender to God's will, then we accept everything that comes by itself. And then we, whatever effort we make, even the effort that we make, see, this is a very important point to understand that if it is God's will, then do I sit quiet? Do I do nothing? No, that is not what is meant. That will be explained in this conversation now. Sri Ramakrishna says, I am a fool, I know nothing. So who then says all this? If I am a fool, if I know nothing, if I have not read anything, then how do I say all these things? He is himself answering. He says, I say mother. Mother does it. Mother is nothing but this Yogamaya or Prakriti. Mother, I am a machine, you are the operator. I am the house, you are the indweller. I am the chariot, you are the charioteer. I do what you make me do. I speak as you make me speak. I move as you make me move. Not I, but only you, you. That is the essence of all mantras. Mantra is a technique where, or the repeating of the name of the Lord, or Bhakti Yoga, and all those self surrender, prayer, all these things emphasize one thing, that the more we reduce our ego by saying that it is you, the Ishta, the all powerful Ishvara, who is controlling me like the operator is controlling the machine. I am just a machine, but to make me run, to make me work properly, a good operator is required. And if we have the highest operator, the one who created this machine, if he operates the machine, then it is wonderful. So he says, I am the chariot, you are the charioteer. Without the charioteer, the chariot does not move, or even if it moves, it will go in different directions. If it is left at the mercy of the horses, you can't expect a chariot to go. Somebody has to control the horses. So that inner controller, which is also given the name Antaryamin. Antaryami means one who dwells inside, who controls our destinies from inside. The cosmic Ishvara, the Ishvara or the Lord who controls us from inside. He is also all pervading, is also controlling us from inside. You make me speak, you move, I move as you make me move, not I, only you, you. Naham, tuhu. That is what Sri Ramakrishna used to say. That my attitude is, I do not know what is good, what is bad. I do not know what is right, what is wrong. I am confused by these dualities. So, O Lord, who dwellest within me, who dwell within me, you try to control me in such a way that whenever I want knowledge, whenever I want true knowledge, you supply it to me. And that is how he explains his capacity. Because his union with the Divine Mother all the 24 hours of the day. It was an eternal connection. She was the eternal driver of his machine, the machine which he considered his body to be. His body was just a mere machine. And the inner controller, he did not give the control to other people as we do. Our machine is controlled by so many external forces which make us helpless, which make us slaves to their wishes and whims and fancies. Our machine, though we think we out of ego, we may say we are controlling our own machine, but then you have to see our machine is controlled by so many other factors outside of ourselves. If it was just free will and only you were responsible for controlling the machine, then it was okay. Then it is fine. But it doesn't happen. The machine is being controlled by so many forces. So our ego or our free will is not enough. It has a capacity to make it run for a distance. But then if you want to run it properly, you have to hand over the reins to a proper charioteer. And who else can become? That's the significance of Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna's charioteer himself is the Lord himself. So that is why his chariot, no harm came to his chariot. That is the significance of the Mahabharata war and the story. That one whose chariot is driven by the Lord himself, as the indweller, he has no reason to worry. That's the idea. So, not I, you. So that is, as I said, the essence of all mantras. Whenever we forget this, we get a blow. So the mantra is a sort of reminder. When you say Namaha, not me, you. It is you, not me. It is you, not me, who is controlling everything from within. That is the idea between all the mantras. They begin with Om, the source, and we have come out of the source, that is Brahman or Purusha. We have, through the power of his Yogmaya, we feel our identities as little beings, powerless beings, and going back to the source and identifying ourselves with that cosmic person, that Ishvara, who was controlling us all the time. All we have to do is allow him to control and know that he is controlling, and be a willing subject. Be, be a willingly you have to self-surrender. It's not that he forces you to self-surrender. The Lord never does that. One has to do it through one's free will which one has got. Of course, you may say that free will or that desire to surrender also is given by the Lord himself. It may be so, but still, that is how, at least when we have the idea of free will, we have to make efforts and say that he is the machine, he is the uh, operator, and I am the machine. So that feeling gave Sri Ramakrishna all access to all knowledge. So when the machine is in the hands of the creator, he has access to the mind of the creator, he has access to the mind of Ishvara, which is the cosmic mind or the Mahat. So what lack of knowledge will he have? So he says, when Radha was carrying a pitcher with 1,000 holes and not a drop of water leaked out of it, Radha did not have money to buy new pots. But she had so much faith in Sri Krishna, and she was not even conscious that her pot is broken in so many places and water would have leaked. But the impossible happened. And whenever she carried water, not a drop of water fell. Everybody was surprised because everybody else, when they brought water in that pot, it would leak. A lot of water used to be wasted, but not when Radha carried it. So when Radha was carrying a pitcher with 1,000 holes and not a drop of water leaked out of it, everybody began to praise her, saying that such a faithful wife is rarely found. They said, see, it is because of her faithfulness to her husband, Pativrata, as they say. It is because of that this miracle is taking place. But she was so humble because she always believed it was Sri Krishna who did it. Krishna was the inner controller. So she says, victory to Krishna. Why do you praise me? Just say Jai Sri Krishna. When we say Jai Sri Krishna, what it means is I surrender to Krishna. If I say Jai Sri Krishna or say Jai Sri Ram and say so many names of God, Jai Ma, and then feel that it is I who am doing, then we are doing injustice. So Radha had that spirit of self surrender. When she was praised, when somebody praises you, you have to keep reminding yourself that no, it is not me, but it is the power of mother or power of Ishta, power of God that is responsible for whatever I do. If you want to say that whatever you have done, even if it is bad, it's as Girish Ghosh believed that I don't know anything. If I have done anything bad, it is your responsibility. If I have to do anything good, that is also your responsibility. Then the Lord responded. Sri Ramakrishna took his whole responsibility only when. But you can't say that if I do something good, the credit should go to me. But if I do something bad, Sri Ramakrishna has told this parable many times that you can't say God is responsible for all the bad things I do and take credit for all the good things that you do. You have to refuse to be praised. When people praise you for something that you are uh, doing, which is something phenomenal, something wonderful, at that time, as Sri Ramakrishna says, I don't say anything. It is mother who pushes, just as the farmer pushes the grain. Mother pushes this Rash Thele Diche. Rash Thele Diche. Rash mane the heap. She is just one heap is over, she sends another heap. So there's no shortage of knowledge. I just go on speaking and she speaks through me. So he's trying to explain it to the doctor. I am merely his maid servant. It is in that same mood. Now, see, Sri Ramakrishna is telling that sometimes I do some things which appear to be very strange, but that is because mother inspires me to do. Once he said, in that same mood, I once put my foot on Vijay's chest. Though I have such great respect for him, I put my foot on his chest. What would you say to that? He is asking the doctor. He said, not only speaking wonderful truths, but there are many things which mother does through me, which I don't understand. Normal circumstance, I would not have touched Vijay Krishna Goswami, who was such a reputed founder of a sect of Brahmo Samaj. I would not normally touch my foot to his chest. That was his way of giving grace. Even he did it in case of Swami Vivekananda. When he wanted some experience, he just touched his feet. Sometimes he used to touch his hand. So he says, what do you say to that? Now, just to ask, because he had that conviction, but he wanted doctor to believe in this. But the doctor would not admit. He says, doctor, no, you should be careful now. Don't keep on doing this. People will see they are still not able to understand the significance of the intuitive power which Sri Ramakrishna had and the type of power he could transmit by his touch. Sri Ramakrishna folding his hands. How can I help it? He says, I don't do it intentionally. These things happen when I am in that divine mood of conferring grace upon somebody. I just happen to do it in whichever way I like. Sometimes I touch the foot, sometimes I touch my head, sometimes I just wish. So that is known as Shambhavi Diksha. You don't even have to utter the mantra. Or sometimes he used to write the mantra on the tongue. And sometimes he used to utter it in his ear. So whether it is through sound or whether it is by touch, they could transmit spirituality. Sri Ramakrishna with folding hands, how can I help it? When the mood comes over me, I become unaware of everything. It is mother who acts. I just simply surrender my will, and under that influence of that divine grace or divine will, I just do whatever she makes me do. I have no idea what I'm doing. Then doctor says, you must be careful. It's no use just to fold your hands with humility. Now, Sri Ramakrishna told this with lot of humility. He said, see, I am not arrogant about this, but I just really don't know what happens. I'm telling you in a very humble way. So doctor still is not convinced. So he says, it will not do just by folding hands like this. He thought perhaps it is some kind of pretense. But he said, you should not do it, otherwise there will be problems. Sri Ramakrishna, can I do anything myself in that mood? What do you think of that state? If you think it is pretense, I would say that all your science is less than worthless. So now he is giving a challenge to Dr. Sarkar. He says, I experience it. It is a mood that comes to me, and in that mood I do these things. And still, if you don't believe me and say that it is a pretense, then all your learning is worthless. If you think that by getting a few degrees, by becoming a doctor, you have understood everything, then you are wrong, because this is a phenomena. He is trying to establish it in a very scientific way. It's a matter of my experience, and that experience has shown that it has transformed so many people. It's not just a pretense. If it were a pretense, it would not transform people. It would not give the same kind of experience or vision to the people whom I touch. But if it happens, that means it is not a pretense. So what kind of logic, or what's the use of all your knowledge of medicine and all? Doctor then still says, sir, if I think that, oh, then he tries to reconcile or tries to say, yes, I know that. I know there is something different. It is not a pretense, but I still don't know what it is, so I am not going to give a judgment. He's trying to take a middle position, and he says, sir, if I think that, then why do I come so often here? If I thought you were just a pretense, you are fooling other people. I don't believe that, but I don't know how it happens. That's why I'm telling you, I don't know the reason. That's why you don't do it. But I am not saying it is a pretense. I know it happens. But how does it happen? Why does it happen? What is this experience? I do not know. Otherwise, why would I come? Look, I neglect my work to come here. I miss my visits with many patients. His business is suffering because he comes to see Sri Ramakrishna and spends 6-7 hours. He says, while I stay here for 6 or 7 hours, so many patients I lose. But still, I find this so fascinating, though I do not understand. I know it is not a pretense, but I don't think what you experience is satisfying me rationally. That's what he wants to say. Then the conversation is going on, but there is a subheading. I will not fight. The Bhagavad Gita, only God is the doer, Arjuna is merely an instrument. Now, there are certain verses from the Bhagavad Gita which are being quoted here. Then Sri Ramakrishna is replying. He says, I said to Mathur Babu, don't think I feel blessed because an important man like you believes me and respects me. He had the nature of a child, used to say whatever came to his mind. Perhaps he thought that Mathur Babu, by heaping a lot of praise on on Sri Ramakrishna, would make him puff with pride. Naturally, if a person like Mathur Babu was the landlord of a huge estate who inherited the entire wealth of Rani Rasmani, who was a very wealthy and rich lady, he was one of the most powerful people even in those days. So, but Sri Ramakrishna, like a child, is telling him, don't think I feel proud, don't think I feel blessed because an important man like you believes me and respects me. You may respect me or not, I don't care. But the fact is that a mere man can do nothing. So he says, I'm going to tell you the truth today. I don't, because an important person like you respects me, I don't feel proud. Because man is nothing for me. All human beings are equal. Not only equal, they are worthless as human beings unless they manifest the divine within. You may respect me or not, but the fact that a mere man can do nothing. He is not only nothing, he can do nothing. He is powerless. Only God makes one respect another. So it is only God's power, God's grace that makes a person respect another person. If you see any person respecting another person genuinely, he says, know that it is God's will, or maybe the God's will, that is grace that is manifesting. When Sri Krishna told Naren, you have 18 powers, he was just laughing. He said, how ridiculous. If Keshav has 1 power, you have 18 such powers. That means you are 18 times greater than Keshav Chandra Sen. And he was the founder of a very big religious movement. So a young college boy, when he is told that you are greater than Keshav Chandra Sen, he thought this person is mad. Sri Ramakrishna is mad, because how I am just a college boy struggling to get a job. I'm a most ordinary person having so many problems to face in my life. I have not even solved my own problems of the world. But here is a person who tells me that I have 18 powers and you'll do wonderful things, you will preach. And finally, you see what he said proved to be true. But at that time, people don't believe. So he says, because don't think because some holy person, some rich person respects you, you become great. It is because mother's grace is there, that she is bringing all these people to me. I know nothing. I don't take credit for it also. I believe I'm just surrendered myself to the mother, and she makes all the great people come unasked, uninvited to see me. Before God's power, man is a mere straw. So don't think this body, that's why he never referred to his body as me. He used to say this. This means this body, as if this is just a machine. As you would refer to a machine, the operator will say this machine will do this. So he used to consider his Annamaya Kosha, the body, and the Pranamaya Kosha as a mere machine, which was being used by the Divine Mother to do certain tasks, which he was very glad to do, whatever she said, without caring for the consequences. Because he knew, once I have the operator, I give the charge of my machine to a good operator, then the machine will run properly, then the chariot will run properly. Then the doctor says, the doctor is answering Sri Ramakrishna's statement. He says, do you think I respect you because some fisherman believes you? Now, fisherman means Mathur Babu. Now, he understood it wrongly. He tries to tell Sri Ramakrishna that I don't come here because that Mathur Babu, of course, Mathur Babu was a great person, but he was still a fisherman, and the doctor prided himself that he was an educated doctor and a very respectable person in Calcutta. And though he was a rich person, he was after all a fisherman. So, with that attitude, that worldly attitude, he's trying to say that I don't come to you because that fisherman respected you. Even if Mathur Babu had not respected you, I would have come. That's what he is also trying to explain. I have respect and regard for you as a man. I don't know what divinity is, what your experiences are, what God is, what is surrendering to God. All I don't know anything of that sort. I just come to you because I respect you as a man, as a good man, as a pure man, as a simple man, as an uncomplicated person. I don't know the secret behind your divinity and all those things because I don't believe them myself. But still, I come to you, not because Mathur Babu or that fisherman comes to you, but I come here because I really respect you. Sri Krishna. Then Sri Krishna is not going to easily give up. He says, Am I asking you to respect me, brother? He's saying very humbly, said, I have never asked you to respect me. I am just speaking what mother tells me. I tell it. Whether it pleases you or not, I don't know. Whether it pleases Mathur or not, I don't know. But I can't be like the worldly people, praising people for their wealth, for their position. I do just as mother makes me do. In short, he's trying to say that whether you respect me or abuse me or criticize me, I'm not going to be affected because I do only what mother tells me to do. I'm just an instrument. I'm helpless. I just act as she makes me act. Then he says, Girish Ghosh says, Girish Ghosh interferes, seeing that the conversation is not going too far and Dr. Sarkar is not accepting. He says, does he ask you to have respect for him? I mean, he's trying to explain further to the doctor that has he ever told you that you have to respect him? You made so much fun of him. He didn't mind. In the initial stages when doctor came, he just looked upon Sri Ramakrishna as a patient. And when he saw all these things, people doing pranams to him, people respecting him as a guru, he didn't like that. And he often spoke his mind. He spoke very frankly. And that did not upset Sri Ramakrishna. So that's why he's saying, Sri Ramakrishna never asked you to respect him. Does he ask you to have respect for him? I remember one incident when Swami Vivekananda was in England. Some of his women devotees told him, because Swami Vivekananda was meeting many people, some of the clergymen and some of the other people. He used to meet them. And some of them seemed to be impressed and some of them were not very much impressed. And behind his back, of course, they would not say anything in his presence, but once he left, they made some strange remarks. And because they perhaps did not believe in his philosophy or in what Swami Vivekananda said. So then these devotees, these disciples of Swamiji, they said, Swamiji, let us not go back to him again. That person doesn't agree with all you say. He disagrees with many things. Then Swami Vivekananda, just like a child, in a very uncomplicated way, he said, why should I avoid him because he does not agree to what I say? Does a person have to agree to everything I say or respect me for everything so that he becomes dear to me? What is it to me? I just tell what I have to tell. Whether he accepts it or not, that will not decide how I should. I know he is a good man. Is it necessary for everybody to agree with me to be a good person? There can be good people who may not agree with me. So that kind of attitude, humility, Sri Ramakrishna had. And Girish Ghosh is trying to explain to uh, Dr. Sarkar that he's never asked you to respect him. Sri Ramakrishna had never asked you whether you make fun of him. He just speaks what his mother makes him. So Girish Ghosh is in a way trying to explain to Dr. Sarkar his childlike, uncomplicated nature. Doctor to Sri Ramakrishna. Now, are you saying that this kind of attitude is also God's will? Now, he just wants to know, why are you behaving in this way? Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, yes. What else am I saying? What else am I saying? Yes, that is exactly all my actions, all my behavior, all my humility is just because of God's will. Because God wills, and because of God's grace, He makes me act in the way I'm doing, and that attracts people. So it is all His credit, all credit to the Lord. Nothing for me, because I am nothing. I'm just a fool. What can a man do before the will of God? Then he gives the example. Arjuna said in the battle of Kurukshetra, I won't fight this battle. I won't kill my relatives and friends. Sri Krishna said, Arjuna, you will have to fight. Your nature will compel you to fight. Maya vaite nihataha purvameva nimitta matram bhavasavyasachin. The 11th chapter, Vishwarup Darshan. Sri Krishna is showing, I have already killed them. You were just an agent. Nimitta matra bhavasavya. Nimitta matram. You just become an instrument. This whole drama that is unfolding now on the battlefield of Kurukshetra has already been planned and decided by the Supreme Lord. It is going to happen. Don't think you are, by refusing to fight, you are going to escape it. Your very nature will make you fight. You are full of rajas. and it is your rajas, nature of rajas. But of course, it is a, you are fighting on the side of dharma, so it is a just fight. It is a rightful fight. And because your nature will make you fight, you will fight. You can't say, I will not fight. Your very nature will make you fight. Maya vaite nihata purvam eva. I have already killed them. Killed them means the consequences, the future of the war, I know who is going. And he, in fact, shows all the people who are dying, entering his mouth. He shows his wonderful Vishwarupa, the universal form of the Lord. In the in his mind's eye, he plays out the whole drama, and Arjuna is totally taken aback seeing all the destruction and everything that is going on. So he says, please withdraw that form. I am not able to see this divine form. He wanted to know, but his Vishwarup Darshan, after seeing it, the power of Yog Maya, he said, it's better that I just surrender and do as you tell me. That is a much better way. I don't want to see this phenomenal power of Ishvara. I am not ready to see as yet. So he says, your nature will compel you. See, Krishna revealed everything to him, that everybody had been already slain. Some Sikhs that came to the temple said that even the leaf of the Ashwatha tree trembles by the will of God. The Sikhs believe that everything happens by God's will. That is what their gurus told them. Okay, you have to believe that everything, even the leaf. So there are so many poems by the gurus in Granth Sahib which says that nothing moves without the will. No leaf even is blown, trembles on that Ashwatha tree, trembles by the will of God. Not a single leaf can flutter without His will. So that's one of the way the Sikhs describe how the Guru Granth Sahib or maybe their poems describe how the will of God acts. How can we perceive it in the universe? So every shaking leaf of the Ashwatha tree moves by the will of the Lord. It moves in a particular way only by the will of the Lord. So this is the ultimate truth that one has to understand and surrender to that truth. Liberty of or necessity, influence of motives. So doctor is still not convinced. He asks, if it is the will of God, why do you chatter? Why do you talk so much? If it is the will of God, just keep quiet. There is no fallacy, there's no logic in this argument, but he's still trying to ask Sri Ramakrishna. He said, if that is so, if everything is the will of the Lord, why do you take so much effort to tell the people? Why do you chatter? Why do you talk so much to give spiritual knowledge to others? Sri Ramakrishna, he says, he makes me talk. The Lord makes me talk. Do you think I am interested? I do it out of ego, that I want to convert you, I want to change you, I want to advise you. No. Sometimes you would have seen Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when people asked him some mystical questions, he says, something is holding my throat. I am not able to tell you. My mother is holding my throat. I am not going to tell you. So it's not always that he spoke. Sometimes he used to keep quiet also. If he felt that his mother does not wish to tell anything further than this, he would simply stop. So he was totally resigned to the will of the mother. So he says, he makes me talk, so I talk. I am an instrument, he is the operator of the instrument. Then the doctor says, you say that you are the instrument. It is all right to say that. Or be quite knowing that everything is God. So he says, there are two ways. That is what doctor thinks. That you say you are an instrument and you talk, it's fine. But there is another way. Because everything is God and you can't make any difference in this world, you can also keep quiet. So why don't you keep quiet? So he's a bit argumentative by nature and he goes on asking questions. These are typical questions which are asked by people who don't have faith in the power of the spirit. But you cannot blame it. He was a genuine person. At least he accepted that there is something good and great about this person as a human being, if not as a god or an incarnation. And that attracted him. And Sri Ramakrishna loved him because of that. He knew that there is some basic spiritual urge or some basic spiritual quality in him which attracts the doctor. And though he made fun, though he criticized, though he argued, Sri Ramakrishna was never upset. Perhaps he thought that even this asking of questions, even this troubling him or asking all sorts of questions is also a will of God. Because if he says that, he has to behave in that way. Then doctor says, Girish says, say what you like, brother. Now Girish tries to interfere and says, this is not going anywhere. Now this doctor will go on and on and on and on and asking questions. It will tire Sri Ramakrishna. They were worried about his health also. So Girish says, say what you like, brother, but it is he who makes us act. He means the Lord who makes us act. What Sri Ramakrishna is saying, it is the Lord who makes us act. Can anyone take a single step against Almighty's will? Then the doctor argues with Girish now. Sri Ramakrishna is just watching. Girish, doctor says, but he himself has given us the free will. See, he has given me the free will. That's what doctor feels. And he says, I can meditate on God or I cannot, I can, and if I don't like, I don't have to. So that free will God has given me. Should I not use it? Girish says, then Girish gives a wonderful answer. He says, if you meditate on God or do any other good work, you do it because you like to. It is not you who do these things, but your liking that makes you do. Then doctor says, why? I do them as duties. Now they are talking from a totally different plane now, worldly plane. You are doing because you like it. It's not that you are a neutral person. He says if you meditate on God or do some good work, you do it because you like it. Now you don't like it, so you're not meditating. You're serving or you're coming and treating Sri Ramakrishna. That's fine because you like to do it. The day you will like to meditate, you will do it. Then doctor says, no, it's not, not like that. I do it because it is my duty. I have been employed, I am a doctor, so I do it. It is my duty. Now this idea of duty has been criticized by Swami Vivekananda. He says duty, people often say it's my duty, it's my duty. Then they marry, then they have children, then they say it's my duty to rear the children. Fine, when the children grow up, they say no, it's my duty to look after the grandchildren. They create duty. The duty is also a result of ego. That's what Sri Ramakrishna wants to say. That's why Swamiji says duty is like the midday sun which scorches a human being. If you do it as a worship of God, then all the actions that you do are good. But if you do it as a duty, then you are bound to this world. Because duty is, the idea of duty is something which is born out of ignorance or born out of ego. Ego which is a product of ignorance. So when you do something as a duty, the same thing, one may be doing some professional job or something, but he can do it both ways. He can do it as a duty or he can do it as an offering to God as karma yoga. In the second case, he will not be bound. In the first case, that duty will lead to some other duty, that duty will lead to some other duty, and one will get bound. So that's why Swami Vivekananda say, this idea of duty which people glorify is like the midday sun. Of course, he did not mean that you should not do your duties, but don't do it as duties. Do it as something which you should do as an offering to God, as a humble instrument of God. That is what. So, Girish says, that's because you like to do your duty. Doctor says, suppose a child is being burned. I go to save it out of a sense of duty. So, doctor is not going to give up. Then Girish says, finally, you feel happy you are able to save the child. That is why you rush into the fire. It is the positive feeling that makes you go. You take opium in the expectation of enjoying spicy food later. Some people used to perhaps take opium as an appetizer. So they wanted to eat the spicy food. So maybe a little bit of opium, maybe that is the reason. So everybody laughs. Then Sri Ramakrishna answers this question in a different way. It is a big paragraph. Knowledge, the object of knowledge, known, these are the impulse. Why do we do work? It's a very, very important topic. Now, after listening to both these arguments of the doctor and Girish, Sri Ramakrishna says something. I'll just read out very quickly and we will discuss it because it requires a lot of discussion. Sri Ramakrishna says, I'll just read out without commenting on that. You have to have some kind of faith to take up any work. Now he's trying to reconcile the idea of duty with the idea of doing work as worship. You think of your objective and take pleasure from that. You see how nicely Sri Ramakrishna is not a professor of logic, but you see how he's following the trend of the argument of two great intellectuals. Girish was a great intellectual and also Dr. Sarkar. But Sri Ramakrishna, after hearing them both argue and getting nowhere, he comes and gives a beautiful solution. That is what he meant when my knowledge comes from intuition. It comes from by the grace of the mother, and I just speak as she makes me do. So he says you have to have some kind of faith to take up. You have to just listen carefully. Next class we'll discuss. You have to have some kind of faith to take up any work. You think of your objective and then take pleasure from that. Only then you will do work. Suppose there is a metal jar full of gold coins buried in the ground. First, you have to know about it, that it is there. When you think of the jar and think of the gold inside, you feel pleasure. So it's a pleasure that makes you do that work, not just the duty. Then you begin to dig into the earth. As you dig, you hear a metallic sound which makes you happy because that confirms there is something lying below. Then the side of the jar becomes visible and you become happier as you go nearer to the goal. In this way, your happiness gradually increases. Standing on the veranda of the temple, I have seen sadhus preparing to smoke hemp and anticipating the joy. Now, we will discuss about this. This is a nice paragraph. The motive for our action. What is duty? What is not duty? What is karma yoga? All these things can be understood in the light of this wonderful analysis which Sri Ramakrishna has done. But we are running short of time. So we will discuss about it in our next class. In the meanwhile, if you have some questions, we can just. Yeah. Do I have to unmute you? Yes. You can ask the question or ask it in chat. Those who want, they have to unmute themselves. If there is a question. Oh, there is one question now. How does God decide his will? Now, this you have to ask God. It's an interesting question. But it's a good question, but something which is impossible for one to answer. God doesn't decide the will. God doesn't decide his will. He doesn't have to decide because decision is made by us when we are not self-willed. We are a victim of our circumstances. So that ability to take decisions depends on our knowledge. But one who has full knowledge, there's no question of taking decision. It is everything is flowing by his will. So he doesn't have to decide. He doesn't have to decide that things will happen that way. It spontaneously unfolds itself. But in our case, we get a feeling because of our ego that we are deciding. We have a free will. I can be happy. If I do this, I'll be happy. When I do that, I find I do not become happy. Then I take up something else. Then I feel that I'll become happy. So this indecisiveness, this trying to force our will upon others or force our will upon ourselves, thinking that we have a free will, is something which comes out of ignorance. But God is all knowing, so there is no question of deciding. He doesn't have to decide because for him everything is the same. For us, it is either good or bad, happy or unhappy. When these dualities are there, the dualities that we see makes us take one decision or the other. We avoid raga and dvesha. I mentioned dvesha means we try to avoid what we don't like. We try to we are attracted by that which we like. So like and dislikes are because raga, dvesha, this dvandva moha is in there. So Sri Krishna says, I don't have, he doesn't, the Lord himself doesn't have the dvandva moha. He is not ignorant. So there is no question of his will or his will is there, but he doesn't have to decide his will. The will is self unfolding. Okay. Now there's one more question. What is meant by internal attachments? Is not attachment to others and objects external attachment? Now, the idea of attachment has to be understood very carefully. If you really speak or really consider this fact, then there is no such thing as internal or external attachment. If there is an object outside and if one is attached to it, it is through the mind. So you may call it external because the object is outside of you. You perceive it outside of you. But if you close your eyes in your dream, you may say it is an internal attachment. You may be attached to a house in your dream, or you may not like to give up that house, beautiful house. You have dreamt that you have built a beautiful house, whereas apparently it does not exist outside. But it is, you can't say it is purely internal. The external attachment that you have and the internal attachment that you have, both are the same, almost the same. The effect is same, though it appears that they are different. In one case, the object is outside, which you see and you dream about it and you are attached to it. You have acquired that house. But even in the dream, that internal attachment is equally, the mind is involved in both. In one case, it is the external mind or the waking state, other it is a dream state. But nevertheless, the attachment is something which is in both cases are equally harmful. Of course, you may say the attachment that you have for your dream house will vanish as soon as you get up. But so also the attachment you have, which you have for your house when you are waking up, will also vanish just as the dream house vanishes when you attain realization. When one attains Satchidananda Brahman, this house and all these things, objects, they still may be there or they may not be there, but it doesn't make any difference. As Sri Ramakrishna suffered from cancer, he had so many problems. Now he could detach himself at will. So there is no question of external attachment or internal. The attachment is of a similar nature, only its effect is seen in different levels. If it is seen in a sukshma dream state, it is known as a dream attachment. If it is seen outside in a waking state, it is known as external. So your question second part is not attachment to others and objects, external attachment. Now the objects when they are living, suppose you are attached to a person and that person is no more there, but still the attachment continues to linger on. You feel that you are missing somebody. So is that attachment external or internal? You can't say because the effect is the same. When you were there, suppose he has gone away, you miss him. But if that person comes, you are in his company and you are still attached. But if he goes away far off, is still living but goes away far off, you still miss him, and that is also an attachment, and that missing itself is an attachment. So also, if that person is no more, still you can have the, so the attachment is something which is internal always. the effect of the attachment is felt internally. So it is the internal attachment that we should worry about. Having the thing externally doesn't really matter. So that's why Janaka said, I have a whole empire, I'm ruling over everything. But tomorrow, if it is burnt or shattered to pieces, I don't care. Because he was attached only to his supreme soul, the Atman. So that is the goal. If we think the Lord is doing everything, if we attach ourselves only to the Lord and have a kind of working attachment with everything other than the Lord, then that attachment is not harmful. But in both the cases, the attachment is always in the mind. Without the mind, there is no attachment or no detachment. Okay. If our present life, okay, one, if our, oh, there are many questions now. Maybe some of the questions I'll take up next time. In Kurukshetra, Sri Krishna provided his army in the other side and was actually fighting against his own army. So what was he trying to teach us, and what is the significance of this event? The event has absolutely no significance. See, one has to be very clear when one wants to learn spirituality. You cannot measure spirituality on the scale of material development or material. Uh, they are totally against each other. Either you go towards the spirit or you go towards matter. If you go towards matter, you call it mammon, as the world, the gross world as we see. As Jesus said, you cannot have the mammon and the spirit together. You cannot have God and mammon together. So when you say God, it is going towards the spirit. So the Kurukshetra war or any other action which Arjuna has done, every experience of ours, whether it is a war, whether it is a just war, unjust war, these are all moral issues. These are worldly issues which have their own logic. Dharma, adharma, who was fighting, what is dharma? There are so many wonderful things. But when it comes to spirituality, it teaches us whether you fight a just war or a unjust war. The more you are attached to the gross, the more you are attached to the Annamaya Kosha. Why were they fighting? They were fighting for an empire. They were fighting for something which neither Arjuna nor the Kauravas would be able to retain. If suppose Kaurava had won the war, would they able to enjoy that empire eternally? So Krishna is just telling him through the message of the Gita. The situation of the war is not at all important. Even if it was a very small war, even if people were not killed, there was a temporary, the message is the same, that there is no solution to the problems of the world. There is no worldly solution. There can only be a spiritual solution to our worldly problems. That is the great message of the Gita and the message of all the scriptures, that no matter how much you try, these things which are fall under the realm of Maya, though they have some temporary solutions, temporary explanations, they are not eternal explanations. So, whether he was fighting with his own army who had gone to the other side, or whether he was fighting with another army, it is not a question of that. The Gita or the Mahabharata, on the whole, if you see, Sri Krishna's only goal was that only there is one eternal thing, that is the Spirit or the Lord or Ishvara, which does not change. All other things, however much you acquire them, everything will go and death will level everything. That is another message which Yudhishthira understood. The answer to the three Yaksha Prashnas. He says, every day we see people dying and yet we think we are going to live eternally. That was one question which perplexed. And the answer to that question was the Bhagavad Gita. When the Yaksha asked Yudhishthira, what is the most surprising thing you see in this world? Then he says, we see people dying around us every day, and yet every person thinks that he is going to live eternally. What greater surprise, what greater foolishness is there in this world? So to understand what is in us that dies, what is in us that is eternal, to show that is the purpose of both the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata. Now, there's one more question. It is well known that in the early stages of his acquaintances encounter with Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda did not passively submit to the authority divinity of Sri Ramakrishna, but he never questioned his holiness or purity. Later, he described Sri Ramakrishna as the greatest of all incarnations. According to Vivekananda, other incarnations were all right, but Sri Ramakrishna incarnation is a different matter. Sri Ramakrishna stands head and shoulder with the rest. The combined power of Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Christ is in no way matches that of Sri Ramakrishna. Can you please comment? Now, the idea here is what he saw in Sri Ramakrishna, all the incarnation, it's not that who is superior or who is inferior. When you take incarnations as the manifestation of Satchidananda Brahman, which is eternal, immutable, they are all the same. But their manifestations, the role that they play in the world, you can compare them on the basis of the role that they had to play in the world. Some incarnations had a very easy time. Every incarnation had to fight. Every incarnation had to fight to establish dharma, to restore order. But the complications, but the problems which came when Sri Ramakrishna came were far, far more difficult than the previous incarnation. That is what, in that sense, he is far superior, because he had to face multiple problems. The very existence of spirit was questioned by the people of sciences. That is why this Samshaya Rakshasa Nasha Mahastram, he is the great weapon which destroyed the Rakshasa, the demon of doubt. So doubt came to people in this age, and that would have destroyed the very idea of spirituality. So the idea of spirituality being a superior thing to all the other endeavors of human beings was such a big crisis, and Sri Ramakrishna came exactly to solve that. In that respect, his role or his contribution is more than other incarnations who did not have this problem. Now, if our present life is working out of prarabdha karma, is the individual's yearning for God in this life considered an evolution of free will given by the grace? Prarabdha karma is also God's will, and individual's yearning for God is also God's will. So, in this life, it's a consideration of the exertion of the free will given by the grace of His will. So, all free wills are part of, we are all parts. Only God is the whole, we are all the parts. So, our wills are also little wills attached to that universal will. But the difference is that our wills, we think it is all powerful, and we always feel that our will can accomplish everything. But God ultimately teaches us that our free wills are not as free as we think. It has to be subject to so many changes which we don't want. Our free will wants us to be happy, but our circumstances make us unhappy. We want to be rich, we become poor. So this is now, our free will is not able to express ourselves, but the grace of His will, or the grace, there's no question of grace. The grace of God, you can say. Will has no grace. It is His sweet will. Even the grace is part of His divine will. The universal will manifests itself in the form of grace, and that gives us the free will, that makes us think that we have the free will to do His prayers, to do His japa, to do all the spiritual practices, and have a yearning for God. But that little free will which we think we have is nothing but His grace. It is part of that great will. Oh, there are many questions. I think it will go on and on. I'll take one question and then I will close. In the secular world, information is power. Therefore, information is withheld. In the spiritual world, information comes from within and cannot be withheld. Does power then follow here? That is self mastery. Is that the same divine will, divine power? Yes. In the secular world, we withhold information because of our selfishness. But there are people who want to share information. It's not that everybody withholds information. They just don't want others to prosper. That's why they withhold that information and try to use it for their own selfish purposes. Or that you will see in the world. That is because of the ego. In the spiritual world also, information comes from within and cannot be withheld. That may not be correct because, as Sri Ramakrishna says, when the Divine Mother asks him to do something, speak something, he just acts. He tries to withhold it, or he doesn't even try to withhold it. It just expresses itself. But sometimes, even if he wants to express himself, it is somehow withheld. So we do not withhold this grace, it is also flowing as a parallel thing. As Swami Vivekananda, this is a very good question. Swami Vivekananda said once that one force, there are two forces, centrifugal and centripetal force, always acting. So in nature, you see one force is going in one direction, another. So also in the spiritual world, there is one force that takes us towards the spirit, another force which takes us towards animal level, and finally makes us inert. It takes us towards the gross. And both human beings are subject. He has a choice to go down, or he has the choice to raise himself up to the level of the spirit. So these things are always going on. So in the spiritual life also, it is not that everybody withholds that. People like Sri Ramakrishna are like, he used to give the example, I'll conclude by saying this, he used to give the example of four people, four friends. They saw there is some beautiful music going on the other side of the wall. So the first friend sees, he is so much attracted, he jumps. He doesn't want to share it with others. The second also goes and jumps. The third also goes and jumps. The fourth one, he goes and sees these wonderful things, and he sees of the sees the sorrow, people with so much sorrow outside the wall, below the wall. So he calls all of them and tells, before jumping, he tells everybody that there is this wonderful joy on the other side. So you also please come. He could have simply jumped without telling. So in spiritual field also, people who are less spiritual, they feel that they have got a treasure which they should not share. That's why Swami Vivekananda wanted to be in Samadhi. So Sri Ramakrishna said, what kind of low mentality you have? I thought you will be like that wonderful banyan tree which will give shade to thousands and thousands of people. Don't be selfish. Try to share these ideas, spiritual ideas. Even if your bodies get shattered to pieces, you go on and you have to teach. That is why Sri Ramakrishna made Narendra Nath become Vivekananda and spread the message. So, in the spiritual world, this information that comes from within can be withheld, but most of the really spiritual people don't want to withhold it. They want to just give it. Swami Vivekananda used to say when he was in England, he was in such a hurry. People told him, just relax. Your body has so much of strain now. It will fall to pieces. He said, no, I have to just spread this. That is what my master wanted. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the body falls or goes. So in a short period of 40 years, he just distributed whatever wealth he had. So it is not true that it may not be true that the information that comes from within cannot be withheld. Some people withhold it, so they don't make progress. But those who really are really spiritual, they want to share whatever thoughts they are for people who want it. Whoever is keen. Swamiji even gave it to people who did not want it. That's why some of them did not agree with him and left him. Some people told him, you should not have given it to people who don't deserve it. He said, no, I don't feel like withholding. So some people don't withhold that spiritual power. Like some rich people do not want to, they want to just share the information. share the wealth they have before they go. It's not that people don't want to share, but it all depends on the person. Does power then follow here? That is self mastery. Is that the same divine will? Yes, it is the same divine will or the same divine power which is motivating everybody, whether to withhold the power or distribute the power. Those who distribute the power are the prophets. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, there are some boats, there are some ships. Boats can carry less people, ships can carry large number of people. So those who distribute more, they carry more people with them. Those who distribute less, they carry less people with them. So I'll conclude. Om Shan. There are some other questions we will answer in the next class if possible. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.